What's up, guys? It's me, Grey Wolf, back to do another video for you. You guys may or may not recognize this kit. This is my OFNA 9.5 MBX buggy. This is one of my favorite basher buggies. It's an old discontinued kit, but you can still get parts for it. This thing has just been through all kinds of crap and it's still going. I need to replace the lid. The lid's pretty screwed up these days, but and I've got another one for it. I just haven't painted it yet, so one of these days I'm gonna get around to painting it. So I'm gonna take the lid off for this video. This video is a result of a question that was asked to me by one of my Facebook friends. And basically, if you're not familiar with this kit already, I'll show you an overview of the kit. So here we're looking at an overview of the kit, and basically this originally was not your average 9.5 MBX. This was originally a an OFNA, what did they call it? I want to say they called it an OFNA Pico 21, because the original kit, it's basically a 9.5 MBX, only the kit came with a 0.21 cubic inch Pico engine in it. Now, I bought the kit as a roller. It didn't have the Pico engine in it, and I didn't have a 21 to stick in it at the time. So what I did was in fact, the only spare engine I had laying around at all at the time was my Mach 427 out of my Lowe's LST2, which has since been converted to electric. So as you can see on the side here, you can see down in there, it is the 427 engine, but you'll notice it doesn't have the typical orange head on it. I did replace this with an aftermarket blue anodized head because I had so much blue aluminum bling on it. I figured, you know, why not? But anyway, one of my Facebook friends, and forgive me if my memory isn't serving me correctly, but I believe the person that asked me about this, his name is Shane Barrier, I believe that's what his name is. He was basically asking me, well, okay, wait a minute, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the only engine I had was the Mach 427, which I put the aftermarket blue head on it, and basically modded the chassis and the engine. Well, I don't know, the engine mount I didn't really have to mod. Basically what I had to do is I had to mod the chassis. I had to cut a notch into the chassis for the bottom of the roto start plate to sit in, because it's stuck down just a fraction, I mean just a couple millimeters lower than where the bottom of the chassis was. So I cut out a small piece in the chassis there for that back plate to sit down in, and it mounted right up. Now I did use, since I had a bigger, torqueier motor than the original .21, I did use a 17 or 18, I can't remember now. It's either a 17 or an 18 tooth vented clutch bell from a Savage to give it some extra speed, since it had the torque to push it. And what happened was, after I did that, I discovered that the big block motor was basically consuming fuel at a faster rate, or at least I'm assuming it was a faster rate than the 21, because I was only getting maybe 8 to 10 minutes tops run time on a single tank of gas. This is the original gas tank right here. So basically, what I wanted to do for a while, and it took me a little bit to figure out how to do this, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to add a second fuel tank to it, because basically over here on this side where this fuel tank is, this whole section of the stone guard, this plastic stone guard here that's attached to the chassis, was just a blank empty space. So what I ended up doing, well, the big hurdle to overcome in doing this mod was finding a fuel tank that would fit over here. Now, I found plenty that would fit length and width wise, but I had a hard time finding one that would fit height wise, so I could still mount the body on it. Now, I did end up cutting an extra hole in the body, so I could flip this side up and fill this tank with fuel. But what I ended up finding out after the fact was that actually wasn't necessary, and I'll explain why here in a minute. So, okay, so the question that Shane Barrier asked me was, how do you do the dual tank mod? And it's really, really easy, actually. Essentially, all you're doing is running the tanks in parallel. Originally, when I finally found a tank that I thought would work, and this tank, by the way, is the fuel tank for the Losi 10T, which also happens to be the same tank that the Losi 810 uses, and it may even be, I've seen it listed, I saw it listed on one site as being compatible with the Losi 8 2.0. I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think I don't think this is the same tank that goes in the Losi 8 2.0. Maybe it is, but I'm thinking it's not. At any rate, I know for a fact it does go to the 10T and the 810. That's for sure. I saw that on multiple websites. Well, I know it goes in a 10T because I own a 10T. But at any rate, so I finally found it, and essentially, in order to install it, installing it was easy. Basically, all I did was let's see if I can get a picture of it here. So essentially what I did was I had extra fuel tank mounting posts, and I don't think you can really see down in there. Oh, there we go. You can see the one in the back there, right down there. It's a black piece of plastic is all it is, with screw holes in the ends. And essentially I just drilled 2 holes in the bottom. Let's see. I just drilled 2 holes in the bottom of the stone guard, here and here, and screwed the mounting posts for the fuel tank down to the stone guard, and then, just mounted the fuel tank to the post. That was really easy. Consisted of drilling 2 holes and putting in 4 screws. Although I think I did have to cut down the height of the mounts. I can't remember for sure, but I'm thinking I had to cut down the height of the mounts to compensate for the gas tank being a little shorter or whatever. So, but anyway, that's essentially what I did to install it, and that's the type of tank that I use. Now, what you want to do in terms of fuel tubing is actually pretty simple, and we'll start with the exhaust. Let me get this in the frame here. We'll start with the exhaust right here. So you got your back pressure tube coming off the exhaust, and your back pressure tube is going to run to the normal place it would run to at the top of your fuel tank. In this case, it's in the lid of the fuel tank. So basically, the exhaust is putting back pressure into the first fuel tank. Now normally you would take the fuel line from this gas tank and run it to the engine. But in a dual tank setup, what you do is you take the fuel line from the first tank and you actually run it to what would be the back pressure connector to the second tank. So essentially what's going to happen is your back pressure is going to go through the back pressure line into the first tank and pressurize the first tank, which is then going to push the fuel out of the first tank through the line into the second tank. So the back pressure pushes fuel from the first tank to the second tank. Now your fuel line coming out of your second tank is going to get routed. That's the line that's going to get routed back to the engine. And what I ended up doing was I took a very roundabout way doing it. It comes out the front here, and it actually goes technically goes right in front of the servo plate. Although it's kind of under too. You could probably squeeze it down through there, but I think I actually ran it down under. And then I ran it up here around the body, around the bottom of the body post. And I used one of those fuel clips to kind of clip it together here. And then I ran it down, zip tied it here to keep it in place. Ran it down all the way back beside the first gas tank or fuel tank, and then into the carburetor. So essentially you probably have the idea already, but I'm going to go over the entire thing now because I only went over half of it the first time. So you got your back pressure coming out of your pipe, pressurizing the first tank, pushing fuel from the first tank to the second tank, and then which in turn causes the second tank to be pressurized, and then the fuel will then travel from the second tank through the fuel line and eventually to the motor. Now, there's a couple of neat little benefits that I didn't know originally when I first did this. As I mentioned a minute ago, I cut a hole in the body to compensate for the second gas tank or fuel tank because I thought I was going to have to fill up both fuel tanks. That's not the case. Since the first tank pushes fuel into the second tank is always full. The only time you would have to fill up both tanks is like when you first get out to the field, or if you run the thing completely out of fuel, you would probably want to fill up both fuel tanks. However, in both those cases, you really could just take the body off if you wanted to, if you didn't want to have to cut a second hole in the body. Usually what I do, especially if I'm just bashing, which I don't know that you'd want to run this kind of setup in a race anyway, but if you're just bashing, typically what I try to do is I try to bring it in every 8 to 10 minutes or so, and then that way all I have to do is fill up the first tank and don't have to even mess with the second tank. But the second tank is there in case, if I'm having fun and I forget or whatever, it gives me a little bit of leeway. But primarily, you really, as long as you keep an eye on it, you primarily just need to to fill the fuel into the first tank, and the second tank will pretty much stay full unless you dip into it. So that was one kind of key benefit, if you will. Another key benefit to having all of this extra fuel line here is if I wreck this thing and it flips upside down, it will run for a very long time without any issues whatsoever, because I'm assuming it's because there's so much fuel already in the line that it has plenty of fuel to keep running. Now, I never I only got to run this kit once or twice on the single fuel tank before I put the second one in, so I really don't know how well it would run upside down with just one tank and a regular setup. Now I do know, like my XXL for example, and even my LST2 originally when I first set it up, it wouldn't run very long after you flipped it upside down. In fact, even if I ran, which my fat ass doesn't run very fast, but even if I run, most of the time, unless it just was very close to me, most of the time I couldn't get to the kit to flip it back over in time before it died out. So what I ended up doing with my XXL, my LST2 is electric now, but what I ended up doing with my XXL is I ended up running extra, even though I only got one fuel tank, I ended up running extra fuel line back around the back of the tank, and you know, basically just I kind of ran it about halfway around the kit before routing it to the carburetor, and it does seem to help a fair amount in terms of giving me a little more time to get to it before it starts running out of fuel. Next time I get a chance, when I work on it, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to put even more fuel line on it, maybe, you know, give it a path around, you know, the whole kit or whatever, you know, like go all the way up to the front and then back, and then, you know, come back to the carburetor and see if that doesn't help even more. Because one of the things that I really like about running this kit is if I flip it over, I don't have to worry about it, you know, stalling out or flaming out or whatever. So hopefully I can do that with my other kits too. I apologize, my kit is dirty. I did do a quick cleanup on it using some Cow RC Mutor cleaner, but it is still pretty dirty, and I apologize for that, but I simply don't have time right now to do a total teardown and re-cleaning, just to do a video with it. So at any rate, that's pretty much it. I probably went way more in depth than I needed to, but if you have any, if anybody has any questions or comments, you know, feel free to post them down below. Use the like or dislike buttons, but if you use the dislike button, please tell me why, so that way I can maybe possibly make changes in the future if I get enough requests or complaints or whatever. If you like RC pics, check out my Facebook page. You can also leave me questions, comments, feedback, whatever, on there, or you can even just start up an RC conversation if you want to. That is www.facebook.com/GrayWolfStudios74, or you can send me questions and comments to GrayWolfStudios74@gmail.com. Peace.